The day my daughter-in-law pushed away the soup I'd spent hours preparing and loudly announced she wouldn't eat food made by someone who'd been cleaning toilets, my family sat in stunned silence. Nobody defended me. Not my husband of 32 years. Not my son who I'd raised from birth. In that moment, I realized I'd become invisible in my own home, a servant rather than a person. I'd been up since dawn that morning, preparing Rebecca's favorite French onion soup from scratch. My grandson Ethan was just 3 weeks old, and I wanted to celebrate Rebecca's first outing since the birth with something special. I'd scrubbed the entire house too, knowing how particular she was about cleanliness. The irony wasn't lost on me. When they arrived, Rebecca barely acknowledged me. She cooed over how David's sister Martha had decorated the dining room with fresh flowers, but didn't mention the spotless house or the aroma of soup that had been simmering for hours. Still, I kept my smile firmly in place as I brought the tureen to the table. "I made your favorite," I said, ladling the steaming soup into her bowl first. Rebecca wrinkled her nose and pushed the bowl away. "No thanks, Margaret. I've seen you cleaning bathrooms all day. I'm not eating food made by someone who's had their hands in toilet cleaner." Time seemed to freeze. I waited for someone, anyone, to speak up. David looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Robert cleared his throat and asked Martha to pass the bread. "You're wearing gloves when you clean, right, Mom?" David finally mumbled, not meeting my eyes. That was the moment. After 32 years of marriage, after raising 3 children, after becoming the family's cook, cleaner, and caretaker, that something inside me finally snapped. I set down the ladle carefully, untied my apron, and placed it on the chair. Without a word, I walked upstairs to our bedroom and began to pack a suitcase. "Mom? What are you doing?" Martha had followed me upstairs, concern in her voice. "Taking a vacation," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's long overdue." "Now? But Rebecca just had a baby. Who's going to help them?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and asked quietly, "When was the last time anyone in this family actually saw me as a person?" Martha had no answer. Robert found me in our bedroom, methodically folding clothes into my suitcase. His face was a mixture of confusion and irritation. "Margaret, what on earth is going on? You can't just walk away from dinner. Rebecca's waiting, and the baby needs to be fed soon." I continued packing, saying nothing. The silence between us grew heavy until he sighed dramatically. "Look, you know how Rebecca is with her cleanliness thing. Just wash your hands thoroughly and come back downstairs. David says she's exhausted from the baby." I finally stopped and turned to face him. "I washed my hands before cooking, Robert. I always do. That's not the point." "Then what is? Why are you making such a scene over something so trivial?" "Trivial?" The word hung in the air between us. "Is that what you think of me? That my dignity is trivial?" Robert ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Don't be so sensitive. This isn't about you. Rebecca's had a rough time with the delivery, and David says we need to accommodate her moods right now." "And what about my moods? My feelings? For 32 years, I've cooked, cleaned, and cared for this family. I've supported your career, raised our children, looked after your mother for 7 years until she passed. When was the last time anyone accommodated me?" "That's different," he said dismissively. "That's just what wives and mothers do." I zipped my suitcase closed. "Not anymore. Not this one." Robert's face darkened. "Margaret, you're being ridiculous. Where would you even go?" "To the lake house that I inherited from my parents. The one you always said was too small and outdated to be worth visiting." "For how long?" His voice was rising now. "Until I figure out what I want." David appeared in the doorway, face flushed with anger. "Mom, you can't be serious. Rebecca's hormones are all over the place. She didn't mean anything by it." "Didn't she?" I asked quietly. "She just had a baby. My baby. Your grandson. And you're abandoning us because of one little comment?" I looked at my son. my firstborn, whom I'd loved fiercely from the moment I knew I was carrying him. This isn't about one comment, David. It's about years of comments, years of being treated like the help rather than your mother. That's not true, he protested, but his eyes slid away from mine. When was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask me to babysit or cook a meal or clean your house? He had no answer. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and finished packing my essentials. I'd spent a restless night on the living room couch, avoiding Robert's alternating tactics of cold silence and heated demands. He'd finally stomped off to bed around midnight, declaring that I'd come to my senses by morning. I hadn't. As I moved quietly through the house, I found myself pausing in each room, touching familiar surfaces: the banister I'd polished weekly for decades, the kitchen counter where I'd prepared countless meals, the dining table where my children had done their homework under my watchful eye. This house held the story of my life, yet somehow I'd become merely a supporting character in it. I was loading my car when Martha appeared in her pajamas, clutching a travel mug of coffee. "You're really going?" she asked, her voice small. "Yes," I said simply. "But what about Ethan? What about us?" Her eyes welled with tears. "Mom, families need mothers. That's just how it works." I took the coffee she offered, grateful for this small gesture of care. "I'm not stopping being your mother, Martha. I'm just stopping being everyone's maid. Dad doesn't know how to work the washing machine," she said, as though this were an insurmountable problem. "Then it's time he learned," I replied. "He's 60 years old, not 6. And Rebecca has her own mother, who lives 10 minutes away and has never changed a diaper in her life, according to Rebecca herself. Maybe it's time Patricia stepped up too." Martha bit her lip. "Will you at least tell us when you're coming back?" "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but you can always reach me by phone." As I drove away, my phone began buzzing with messages. Robert's were angry. "This is childish and selfish." David's were guilt-inducing. "I can't believe you'd abandon your grandson like this." Only Martha's held a hint of understanding. "Be safe, Mom. Call when you get there." The lake house was exactly as I'd left it after my father's funeral 5 years earlier. Small, rustic, and overlooking the water, it had always been my sanctuary. Robert had never appreciated its charm, complaining about the spotty cell service and lack of high-end appliances whenever we visited. I opened all the windows to release the musty air, made up the bed with fresh linens I'd brought, and sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun sparkle on the lake's surface. For the first time in decades, I had no schedule to keep, no one's needs to meet but my own. It felt terrifying. It felt wonderful. 3 days passed before Robert showed up at the lake house, his luxury sedan looking comically out of place on the gravel driveway. He emerged from the car clutching a bouquet of roses, my least favorite flower, though he'd never bothered to notice. "You've made your point, Margaret," he announced, thrusting the flowers at me. "Everyone's sorry, now it's time to come home." I didn't take the roses. "I'm not ready." His face reddened. "Not ready? Do you have any idea what's happening at home? David and Rebecca are at each other's throats. Martha keeps crying. I had to order takeout 3 nights in a row." "Sounds challenging," I said neutrally. "This isn't a joke," he snapped. "Rebecca's mother, Patricia, came over to help, but she's useless. Worse than useless. She keeps criticizing everything and making Rebecca cry. The baby won't sleep. The house is a disaster and—" He faltered, seeming to realize that listing all the ways they couldn't function without me wasn't the persuasive argument he thought it was. "I miss you," he added awkwardly, as though remembering a line he'd rehearsed. "Do you miss me, Robert? Or do you miss what I do for you?" He had no immediate answer, which was itself an answer. "Patricia called you a selfish witch," he finally said, his tone accusatory. "David's thinking of hiring a housekeeper, but Rebecca says that's admitting defeat, whatever that means." I gestured to the porch chairs. Would you like some iced tea? Surprised by the change in subject, he sat down, setting the roses on the small table between us. I don't understand what you're doing, Margaret. Is this some kind of midlife crisis? I laughed genuinely for the first time in days. I'm 57, Robert. If this were a midlife crisis, I'd be planning to live to 114. Then what is it? What do you want? I considered the question carefully. I want to be valued. Not for what I do, but for who I am. Robert shifted uncomfortably. You're my wife. Of course I value you. When was our anniversary, Robert? His face went blank. April something? June 17th. It was last month. You forgot, like you've forgotten for the past 5 years. He looked away. I've been busy. We all have choices about what we make time for, I said softly. You've made yours. Now I'm making mine. When he left an hour later, the roses remained on the porch table, already wilting in the summer heat. Week 2 at the lakehouse brought unexpected gifts. I rediscovered old pleasures, reading for hours without interruption, swimming in the cool lake waters at dawn, sketching the landscape as the light changed throughout the day. I'd studied art in college before marriage and motherhood took precedence. Now my rusty skills slowly returned, bringing a satisfaction I'd almost forgotten. My phone continued to buzz with demands disguised as questions. Where do we keep the extra toilet paper? Robert. How do you get baby spit up out of cashmere? Rebecca. When are you coming to your senses? David. Only Martha's messages showed growth. Found Dad's anniversary card from you in his sock drawer unopened. I'm so sorry, Mom. I responded selectively, offering brief practical advice but refusing to be drawn into emotional manipulation. Each time I declined to rescue them from minor domestic challenges, I felt a mixture of guilt and liberation. On day 15, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia, Rebecca's mother, arrived unannounced, her designer handbag swinging from her wrist. So this is where you've been hiding, she said, eyeing the modest cabin with barely concealed disdain. Quaint. I invited her in with more grace than her arrival warranted. Coffee? No time, she said briskly. I'm here to talk sense into you. This little vacation of yours has gone on long enough. Rebecca is absolutely overwhelmed. I thought you were helping her, I replied mildly. Patricia waved a manicured hand dismissively. I'm not cut out for domestic drudgery. Never have been. Rebecca knows that. And yet you criticized my cleaning. She had the decency to look slightly abashed. Rebecca told you about that? Well, she was upset, and I might have said the house wasn't quite up to standards without you there. I waited, saying nothing. Look, Patricia continued, we both know our children need us. That's what mothers do. Sacrifice. Is it? I asked. Is that all we are? Sacrifices on the altar of our children's convenience? Patricia stared at me as though I'd spoken in an alien language. Don't get philosophical with me, Margaret. Just come back and fix this mess. No, I said simply. No? She echoed, incredulous. I'm not ready, and when I do return to visit my family, it will be on different terms. After she left in a huff, I took my sketchbook down to the lake and drew until sunset, capturing the way the light danced on the water. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, untroubled by Patricia's judgment or my family's demands. For the first time, I was becoming reacquainted with the woman I'd been before I disappeared into the role everyone had assigned me. She was emerging slowly, blinking in the light of newfound autonomy, and I was growing quite fond of her. By the 4th week of my absence, the facade of family competence had crumbled entirely. Martha called in tears one evening to report the state of affairs. It's absolute chaos, Mom, she confessed. Dad tried to wash his red golf shirt with Rebecca's white nursing tops. Everything's pink now, and she had a complete meltdown. I could hear the exhaustion in my daughter's voice. "You sound tired, sweetheart." "I am. I've been going over after work every day to help, but it's a lot. David doesn't know how to soothe Ethan when he cries, and Rebecca gets frustrated and locks herself in the bathroom. Dad ordered one of those meal delivery services, but half the ingredients spoiled because no one put them in the fridge." "What about Patricia?" I asked. "Isn't she helping anymore?" Martha's bitter laugh told me everything. "She comes by occasionally with expensive baby clothes or toys, stays just long enough to take photos for her social media, then claims she has a migraine or an appointment and disappears. She hasn't stayed longer than 30 minutes since that first week." I felt a twinge of guilt, quickly followed by resolve. "You know, you don't have to carry this burden either, Martha. They're adults." "But Ethan is their child, not yours. You can be a supportive aunt without becoming his primary caregiver." There was a long pause. "How do you do that?" "Set boundaries, I mean. I feel so guilty saying no." "I'm still learning," I admitted. "But I know that guilt is a poor compass for making life decisions. It took me 57 years to figure that out." After we hung up, I received a flurry of texts from David, each more desperate than the last. "Mom, please come home. We need you. Rebecca's mom is useless. You were right. I don't know how you did all this every day. Ethan misses his grandma." The last one nearly broke my resolve. I missed my grandson fiercely. His new baby smell, the way his tiny fingers curled around mine, his unfocused eyes trying to make sense of the world. But I knew that returning now, without anything fundamentally changing, would only reset the cycle. Instead, I texted back, "I miss Ethan too. You're welcome to bring him to visit this weekend if you'd like." David's reply came quickly. "We can't come all the way out there. It's a 2-hour drive and we barely have time to shower." I turned off my phone, walked down to the lake, and watched the sunset paint the water gold and crimson. Their crisis wasn't my emergency anymore. 6 weeks into my stay at the lakehouse, something shifted. The frantic calls and accusatory texts gradually gave way to messages tinged with something new: reflection. Martha was the first to truly see me. She arrived one Saturday morning with a bag of groceries and an apologetic smile. "I thought you might like some company," she said, "and maybe a break from cooking." We spent the day together, talking more openly than we had in years. As she chopped vegetables for a salad, she confessed, "I never realized how much you did until you stopped doing it. Dad and David act like the laundry fairy magically folded their clothes all these years." I smiled, feeling a bittersweet vindication. The invisible labor of women. "It's not right," she said firmly. "And the way Rebecca spoke to you that day, I should have said something." "I'm sorry I didn't." "Why didn't you?" I asked gently. Martha considered this. "I guess I've always seen you as invulnerable. Like nothing could really hurt you because you were mom, and moms just absorb everything and keep going." "We're human too," I reminded her, "with feelings and limits." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I see that now." Later that week, to my surprise, I received a message from Rebecca herself. No accusations, no demands, just a simple question. "How do you get baby stains out of a white onesie?" I replied with detailed instructions, ending with, "How are you doing, Rebecca?" Her response came hours later. "Tired. Overwhelmed. David tries, but he doesn't really know what to do. My mom pops in for show, takes pictures for social media, then leaves." For the first time, I felt a flicker of empathy for my daughter-in-law. I hadn't considered the pressures she was under as a new mother, trying to live up to impossible standards while surrounded by people who expected her to naturally excel at motherhood. Growing up with a mother like Patricia, who valued appearances over substance, had clearly shaped Rebecca's own approach to life and relationships. "Motherhood is hard," I texted back. "Be gentle with yourself." "Everyone makes it look so easy," she replied. "You always made it look effortless." I laughed out loud at that. If only she knew the sleepless nights, the tears of frustration, the moments of utter despair I'd experienced as a young mother. But I'd hidden all that, believing that's what good mothers did. They suffered silently and solved everything. It was never effortless, I wrote. I just never let anyone see how hard it was. That night, I added a page to my journal. Perhaps in trying to be the perfect mother, I taught my children that mothers don't have needs or feelings of their own. My greatest gift to them now might be showing them that I do. Exactly 2 months after I left, my phone rang with Rebecca's number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it would be another thinly veiled demand for my return. But something compelled me to pick up. "Margaret?" Rebecca's voice was thick with tears. "Are you there?" "I'm here," I answered cautiously. She broke down sobbing, her words incomprehensible through her tears. "Take a deep breath," I coached gently, falling back into the maternal role I'd played for decades. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." She drew a shuddering breath. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. The things I said, about you being unclean, about your cooking, I was horrible to you." Her raw admission caught me off guard. I'd been prepared for manipulation, for guilt tactics, for demands, but not for genuine remorse. "David and I had a huge fight," she continued. "He accused me of driving you away, and I got defensive and said you were too sensitive. But then Martha showed me all these photos of you holding me when I was in labor with Ethan, of you bringing me tea and soup after the delivery, of you rocking him at 3 a.m. so I could sleep." Her voice broke again. "You did all that for me. And then I acted like you were beneath me. I don't know why I did that. My own mother never would have done any of those things." I remained silent, processing her words. "The house is a disaster," Rebecca admitted. "David tries, but he works such long hours and I'm exhausted all the time. Martha helps when she can, but she has her own life. Your husband, Robert, he's completely useless around the house." Despite everything, I laughed at her blunt assessment of Robert's domestic skills. "I'm not calling to ask you to come back and fix everything," she hurried to add. I needed to tell you I was wrong, so wrong. And I'm sorry." Her words hung in the air between us. A genuine olive branch extended across the gulf I'd created by leaving. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "It means a lot to me. Do you think maybe we could start over?" she asked hesitantly. "Not with you doing everything, but with me showing you the respect you deserve?" For the first time in 2 months, I felt a door opening rather than closing. I'd like that, Rebecca. 3 days after Rebecca's call, I invited the entire family to the lakehouse for lunch. It was time for a conversation that was long overdue. They arrived together in David's SUV, looking apprehensive as they approached the porch where I waited. Ethan, cradled in Martha's arms, had grown so much in the 2 months since I'd seen him. My heart squeezed at the sight. "Welcome," I said, holding the door open. "Come in." Robert entered last, carrying a bouquet, not roses this time, but wildflowers similar to those I'd been sketching by the lake. A small but significant sign that perhaps he'd been paying attention after all. Lunch was a simple affair. A hearty vegetable soup and fresh bread I'd baked that morning. We ate mostly in silence until Martha bravely broke the ice. "The soup is delicious, Mom. I've missed your cooking." "I've been teaching myself some new recipes," I replied. "It's been nice, cooking just for pleasure rather than necessity." Rebecca, who'd been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "Your house is lovely, Margaret. It has so much character." "Thank you," I said. "It was my parents' summer place. I've been fixing it up a bit." After the meal, with Ethan napping in the portable crib they'd brought, I knew it was time. "I asked you all here because we need to talk about the future." David immediately tensed. "You're coming home, right?" "This is also my home now," I said gently. "I've decided to stay here, at least for the foreseeable future." "But what about us?" Robert blurted out. What about our marriage? That's up to you, Robert. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but it can't be the same one we had before. I won't be your housekeeper anymore. His face flushed. I never thought of you that way. Didn't you? When was the last time you thanked me for doing the laundry or cooking dinner or managing our entire household? He had no answer. I turned to David and Rebecca. The same goes for you two. I love being Ethan's grandmother, but I'm not your built-in nanny or your maid. David started to protest, but Rebecca placed a restraining hand on his arm. She's right, she said quietly. We've been taking advantage of her generosity. So what are you saying? David asked. You're just abandoning the family? No, I replied firmly. I'm saying that from now on, my time and energy are valuable resources that I choose how to spend. If you want my help, you ask respectfully. You don't assume or demand. And if we need you? Martha asked. You call first. I smiled. And sometimes I might say no because I have other plans. That doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means I'm a person with my own life. Robert looked bewildered. What other plans could you have? I gestured to the easel by the window, where my latest painting stood half-finished. I've enrolled in an art class at the community college, and I'm volunteering at the local library 2 afternoons a week. My time is full in ways it never was before. As they left that evening, each family member hugged me with varying degrees of understanding. David still seemed confused, Martha supportive, Rebecca thoughtful. Robert lingered after the others had gotten into the car. I miss you, he said, and this time it felt genuine. The house isn't home without you. Then perhaps, I suggested, you could visit more often, get to know this place, and the woman I'm becoming. Over the following months, a new family dynamic slowly emerged. Robert began spending weekends at the lakehouse, initially just to check on me, but gradually because he wanted to. He'd arrive with groceries and cook simple meals, proudly showing off newly acquired skills. I never knew cooking could be enjoyable, he admitted one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. All those years I could have been helping you. Better late than never, I replied, clinking my wine glass against his. David and Rebecca brought Ethan to visit every few weeks. The first visits were awkward, with David clearly expecting me to take over baby duties immediately. But when I didn't, something interesting happened. He became more confident in his parenting abilities. I figured out that Ethan likes to be swaddled with one arm out, he told me proudly during one visit. And I'm the best at getting him to sleep, even better than Rebecca. Rebecca's transformation was perhaps the most profound. Gone was the entitled princess who expected to be waited on. She'd roll up her sleeves and help with meal preparation, asking questions about techniques and recipes. My mother never taught me any of this, she confessed one afternoon as we prepared dinner together. She always had housekeepers and cooks. She thought domestic skills were beneath us. There's dignity in all forms of work, I replied, showing her how to knead bread dough, including caring for your home and family. I see that now, she said thoughtfully. I was so wrong about so many things. Martha visited most frequently, often just to sit with me while I painted or to share a cup of tea. She'd been keeping me updated on her own journey of self-discovery. I've started saying no at work when they try to dump extra projects on me, she told me one day. You inspired me. All those boundaries you've been setting, they're contagious. Not everything was perfect, of course. Robert still occasionally slipped into old patterns, expecting me to handle all domestic matters when he visited. David sometimes made thoughtless comments about how inconvenient it was to drive to the lakehouse. Even Rebecca had moments of entitlement that needed gentle correction. But slowly, steadily, they were learning to see me as Margaret, not just mom or grandma or wife, but a person with talents, interests, and limits of my own. One evening, as I showed Robert my latest painting, a landscape of the lake at sunset that had earned praise from my art instructor, He looked at me with new eyes. "You know," he said quietly, "I'd forgotten how talented you are. Or maybe I never really knew." "I'd forgotten too," I admitted, "but I'm remembering now." As our relationship evolved, Robert gradually began spending more time at the lake house. What started as weekend visits naturally extended as he discovered he preferred the peaceful environment and our new, more balanced relationship. By the 6th month, he was spending half his time with me at the lake, working remotely when possible, and traveling to the city only when necessary. 6 months after I left, I finally agreed to stay at the family home for a weekend. I packed lightly, bringing only what I needed for 2 days, and my sketchbook, which had become an extension of myself. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt a flutter of anxiety. This house had been the site of so much invisibility, so much thankless labor. Would stepping back inside erase all the progress I'd made? Rebecca greeted me at the door, Ethan on her hip. At 8 months old, he was alert and curious, his eyes tracking my movements as I approached. When he broke into a gummy smile of recognition, my heart melted all over again. "Welcome," Rebecca said warmly, stepping back to let me enter. The house was different, not just tidier than I expected, but changed in subtle ways that spoke of a shift in priorities. The formal living room we'd never used had been transformed into a playroom for Ethan. The dining room table was smaller, replaced with one that better fit the space. David and I decided we didn't need such a huge table for everyday meals, Rebecca explained, following my gaze. "The old one was your mother-in-law's choice anyway, wasn't it?" I nodded, oddly touched that they'd noticed this detail about my life, that the oversized mahogany table had been Robert's mother's selection, not mine. David appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron and looking slightly frazzled. "Mom, you're here. Dinner's almost ready. Well, sort of ready. The chicken might be a little dry." "I'm sure it's fine," I reassured him, following him into the kitchen I'd once ruled with quiet efficiency. It was messier than I would have kept it, with evidence of cooking experiments gone slightly awry. But there was something endearing about their efforts. The recipe cards propped against the backsplash, the new organizational system they'd created for Ethan's bottles and food. "We've been taking turns cooking," Rebecca explained. "David does Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I do Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. We usually order in on Sundays as a treat." "And who does the cleaning?" I couldn't help asking. "We hired a service that comes twice a week," David admitted. "But we do daily maintenance ourselves." It was eye-opening to realize how much work is involved in keeping a house running. That night, as we ate David's slightly overcooked but earnestly prepared meal, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. They hadn't fallen apart without me. They'd struggled, yes, but they'd adapted. They'd grown. Later, as I sat in what had once been my bedroom, now redecorated as a proper guest room, I opened my sketchbook and began to draw. Not the lake this time, but the new family dynamic I was witnessing. Imperfect, evolving, but fundamentally changed for the better. One year, to the day after I'd walked out of that disastrous dinner, we gathered again around a table, this time at the lake house, which had fully transformed into my home. I'd expanded my art studio into the spare bedroom, taking online courses, and even selling a few pieces at a local gallery. Robert had moved in part-time, spending 3 days a week in the city for work and 4 days with me at the lake. Our marriage had found a new equilibrium, not perfect, but more balanced, with both of us contributing to our shared life rather than me silently carrying the load. David and Rebecca arrived with Ethan, now walking unsteadily and babbling enthusiastically. Martha brought her new boyfriend, a kind man who looked at her with genuine respect. We gathered on the porch for appetizers, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson. As we moved inside for dinner, Rebecca approached me with a little wrapped package. "I brought something special," she said shyly. Inside was a delicate silver frame containing a photo of 4 generations of women. My mother, taken from an old photograph, me, Martha, and Rebecca, with baby Ethan at the center. "I found this quote that made me think of you," Rebecca said, pointing to the engraving on the frame. "The most valuable gift we can offer others is our presence." "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched. Rebecca took a deep breath. "I've been wanting to tell you something. I'm starting a mother's support group in our neighborhood for new moms who might be struggling like I was. We talk about the hard parts that nobody mentions, the exhaustion, the identity crisis, the need for boundaries." "That's wonderful," I said, squeezing her hand. "You inspired it," she admitted. "Your courage to stand up for yourself, to say enough, it changed everything. Not just for you, but for all of us." As we settled around the table for our meal, one we'd all contributed to preparing, I looked at each face. My husband, learning to be a partner rather than just a provider. My son, now a hands-on father who no longer expected women to handle all things domestic. My daughter, stronger in her boundaries. My daughter-in-law, growing into herself with new confidence. And my grandson, who would grow up seeing balanced relationships and shared responsibilities. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To remembering that we're all more than the roles we play. We're people first, complex, worthy of respect, and always evolving." "To people first," they echoed, glasses clinking in the warm light of my lakehouse. The place where I'd rediscovered myself after decades of disappearing into the background of my own life. As I looked around at their faces, I realized that by leaving, I hadn't abandoned my family. I'd taught them, and myself, perhaps the most important lesson of all. That love without respect isn't really love at all. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is simply to stand up and say, "I matter too."